Hello and welcome to the ninth in our series of asynchronous virtual roundtables on transportation, logistics, and supply chain networks under COVID-19. I'm Hani Mahmassani, Director of the Northwestern University Transportation Center, and I will be your moderator. An asynchronous virtual roundtable is one where the interviews have already taken place and have been integrated into a single roundtable. At the end of the interviews, we will have a live Q&A session. To ask a question, please use the Q&A feature of the Zoom platform. Today's theme is on e-commerce and e-fulfillment under COVID-19. We have three panelists with us. First off, we'll have Suresh Krishna, who is CEO of Northern Tool. Then we will have Sean Barbour, who is Vice President for Supply Chain at Macy's. And then third off, we'll have Saman Sai, who is Vice President for E-commerce Operations at DHL. And with that, we'll go to our first panelist, Suresh Krishna. So, Suresh, you're CEO and President of Northern Tool, which you've joined only in April, so congratulations on the move. Previously, you were Senior Vice President and Chief Operations, Supply Chain, and Lean Officer of Sleep Number. And before that, you were at Polaris. You've had a long, distinguished career in various capacities, both in industry as well as in management consulting. And of course, you are a graduate of the Kellogg School of Management. So we're pleased to, again, to have you with us here. So your company, Northern Tool, is an essential retailer, meaning stores have remained open, albeit under CDC safe practice rules. But your company has also had an omni-channel strategy with a well-developed online ordering process with either delivery or in-store pickup. You also sell essential industrial products to deal with COVID-19, like industrial grade disinfectant and deep cleaning machines. Could you describe to us how the pandemic and the associated lockdown have affected demand in stores versus online, and the demand mix in terms of health-related items versus regular general purpose goods?
Thanks, Hani. Appreciate the introduction. As an essential business, very early on when this started, we saw a significant increase in demand for PPE, cleaning chemicals, and also for equipment like the sprayers that we have and pressure washers. And then we saw demand both online and in our stores because there weren't many stores open. We saw a lot of demand in the stores as well. So we were seeing almost 20–30% increase in store traffic. Online was 80 to 100% higher than prior year. And later on, it settled down to across the category. We have 60 different categories that we sell products in. And we saw significant demand as people started to stay home. We saw demand across all our categories and largely led by consumers. Our customer base is a mix of consumers and small businesses. Mm-hmm. And we saw the consumer side of the business pick up significantly, both online and in the stores.
Interesting. So how was your supply chain affected for those products that experienced a surge of COVID-19 related demand? Were you able to supply your customer requirements, or were there difficulties getting certain products because, let's say, of increased competition from other entities for cleaning products and tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been able to keep up with demand early on, very much because we still have a fairly flexible supply chain. 1/3 of our products are private label, so we manufacture themselves. So we are a manufacturer and a retailer. Mm-hmm. And we've had the ability to ramp up production and provide those products for our stores and our online customers. Beyond that, we have great relationships with our suppliers too. So when you talk about is there competitive pressure, we didn't find much competitive pressure putting issues on our supply chain. When we found issues, it was primarily because of COVID-related issues at our suppliers. So either they had some issues and they had to shut down for a day or two, or they had other issues where their suppliers could not supply them. It was not related to competition or lack of availability because other competitors are taking away our products. There are certain categories where we had to come up with an entire new supply chain at a very short period of time. For example, masks that, you know, we had N95, but N95 went away to the frontline healthcare workers. So other people who needed masks when they were in construction sites and landscapers who needed it, we had to come up with a new supply chain out of Asia, or in fact, we finally ended up in Mexico in a matter of weeks. Just 4 weeks, we found new suppliers, we qualified them, and we got their products approved, the design approved so that it could meet the need of our customers. So the speed and agility and nimbleness in the organization and the supply chain was what was helping us continue to win versus any other thing that was happening in the market space.
So going back to a point you made earlier, indications are that, again, while the initial PPE essential goods surge may have subsided, I guess, online purchases have continued to surge compared to same time last year, as you noted. And in fact, the data I had seen from Bank of America suggested increases 80 to 110%, and you just mentioned that. This is in daily online retailing compared to same time last year. So this has been the case apparently for Northern Tool as well, but or is it, are there some products though where you know, there's more dependence on physical presence and in-person testing, where somebody's not going to order some big piece of machinery? I guess they just want to go there and test it. Have you, can you comment on that?
Absolutely. You know, the consumer behaviors are shifting and people are more willing to take risks, so to say, with products that require education, if I could say it, whether you get that in the store with a salesperson, or in our case, we are, I argue we are the original omni-channel retailer, even before the word omni-channel was invented, because the company, about 50% of our sales are direct e-com and 50% is through our stores, which is an enviable position for any retailer, whether you're on either side of the spectrum, either if you're Amazon or if you're, you know, Walmart or Target. In our case, we started off as a mail order catalog company. So we were originally a direct to customer business. And then we started opening stores. We moved it to online when e-commerce started back in the 90s. So we are a good mix between e-com and direct. But coming back to your question, you know, the categories we are seeing sales happen is across the board in all of the categories. And we are not seeing any particular area that is being left behind, so to say. As people started to stay home, they started to do projects on their own, and they are beginning to buy products, which, you know, for us is been across the board, across the 60 categories. There's probably one or two, something like material handling, which is not picked up, but everything else has picked up demand for us across the board in that kind of range.
So turning to e-fulfillment, what challenges are you experiencing in your supply chains from first mile to last mile delivery? Is it product availability, sourcing, replenishment? And you mentioned how the nimbleness there has helped you in that. Or is it the actual moving it out the door and delivering it to the final customer? And for that last, you know, for the, I guess, the transport part, do you rely on your own fleet to deliver, on independent contractors, and or on companies like UPS and FedEx?
You know, we provide across the whole, if you think about our model, it's fairly complex for a company our size. We are about $1.5 billion in revenues, and we deal with over 1,000 suppliers. Our model is, you know, our suppliers, some of them ship, or many of them have to ship it 3 different ways. They have to ship to our warehouses. Sometimes they ship direct to our stores. In some cases, they ship direct to our customers based on how the item is set up. And so in this spectrum, we use all types of transportation. We use parcel, we use LTL, we use full truckload. And for the last mile, you know, we are piloting last mile delivery in one of our markets with a set of stores where we are providing same day delivery. That's still a pilot for us. The most preferred option, what we are seeing customers do, is buy online and pick up in store. And very quickly through the COVID crisis, we actually extended that capability to buy online, pick up curbside.
Yes.
So we have not seen, early on, there was some pressure on parcels. So both UPS and FedEx, they were having struggles with capacity, but now it's fairly normalized. So we're not seeing any particular pressure in any of these areas. We are monitoring, we are worried about financial stability of our transportation providers, and we are watching that closely. We do not have our own fleet. We are dependent on third-party logistics providers, some big like UPS or FedEx, and some others where we might use an Echo and their services to deliver our products, whether it's LTL or within the local markets as well. So we have a pretty mixed model, and we leverage a lot of suppliers relationships to fulfill our e-commerce and even regular store requirements.
Have you found your mix, I guess, of modes or of channels changed during the pandemic, or has it been similar to what it was before?
It's been very similar. As I said, the ones where it is shifting though is the buy online, pick up in store, buy online, pick up curbside. We've seen that. We introduced that capability about 6 months ago, but it's really been pressure tested in the last 8 weeks. And so what may have normally gone from our warehouse to our customer is now switching to being picked up at the store, which is a benefit for us because, you know, we are able to serve it faster. If they had it purchased online but shipped to home, it might have taken 2-3 days because we would have shipped it from the warehouse, versus now they're able to just pick it up locally and they get it right away. And it's also helping us, you know, optimize our overall network where we can bring in more product into the store faster on a more regular cadence and make it available to our customers as quickly as they need it.
So in consumer-oriented retailing, the crisis has brought many new buyers to the online business. Of course, you've been omni-channel for a long time. Has this been the case for Northern Tool as well? And I don't know if you have that information, but what would you say is the split between first-time buyers, those who are new to Northern Tool's online shops, versus established e-commerce customers that are maybe perhaps buying more? And are these first-time online buyers, were they store shoppers who are now going online, or are they new to Northern Tool altogether?
Great question. You know, it's early and we are obviously analyzing the customers that are coming in. We've seen a huge surge. If you look at traffic, our traffic is more than doubled. On an average year, we would serve about 1.5 million customers each year. And you look at the history, there are a lot of customers who sign up for frequent buying kind of practices. And we see over a 5-year period, because not everybody buys our product every year because these are consumer discretionary, so to say, or business discretionary products, more like capital equipment. We have in our database within 5 years about 7 or 8 million people who are buying our products. So we have seen during the surge almost 50% for our e-com, 50% new customers. And that's a big swing for us. Really and we believe what has helped us in this is 2 things. One is we are our store and our online chat, and sometimes people call into our contact center as well, are highly trained salespeople. They know the products, even though we have thousands of products. And our website, there is a lot of literature information available on the product and how to use and compare it. And we also have a deep assortment. So it's not like a big box where they might carry 1 or 2. We carry maybe 10 different models within that category. So all of those is helping us attract more customers than would be a normal set of customers for us.
So do you foresee a lasting shift to e-commerce purchases from consumers, or will they revert to their pre-crisis buying patterns? How much of that additional demand do you think might be retained over time on the e-commerce side?
We believe there is definitely a consumer shift and more confidence in buying big ticket items online. But we also feel like companies like us have an advantage over a normal big box retailer primarily because of what I told you is
Mm-hmm.
even though people are getting confident about buying online, they want certain services. They want to be still provided the information by an expert. And
Yes.
whichever medium they use, whether it's mobile phone, and we are seeing a pickup on mobile-based e-com, um,
Mm-hmm.
or through chat, or through information literature available, um, they are still yearning for that expertise. And we are a high-touch, service-oriented company, and we are able to provide that and differentiate ourselves versus big box. And the second piece that we do differently than big box retailers is service. We actually provide after-sales service on the wide assortment of products we sell. As I said, we have over 60,000 products, and for a majority of them, because of repetitive use, you need some kind of an annualized or service to be done on the product. So we sell parts and service. We have mobile service vans in certain locations, and every store has a service desk that you can bring in your product, and we will service it and return it back to you same day or the next couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
So those two together, the high touch in sales and then after sales service on equipment, and we will service not only our private label equipment, we service Honda generators, and we service
Mm-hmm.
all other brands as well. That
Mm-hmm.
is allowing us to retain customers. We believe this is going to help us win in the future as well.
So it's kind of like the Apple Store approach to tools.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Um, most carriers and shippers that we've talked to have indicated that they see sort of more vulnerabilities at nodes rather than along links. And you've indicated as well that there's been some suppliers who may have had to shut down for a day or two, and you did not have issues so much finding capacity to move things. Have these issues improved or worsened over the last several weeks? The
You know,
vulnerabilities at nodes particularly.
yeah, I think the issues around that has been about primarily around labor and safety of labor,
Mm-hmm.
whether it is in moving of goods or in warehouses. We have had situations where even for our own employees, we've had to make sure that safety levels increase. Use of masks, checking of temperature. So all of that is is going to continue, and we've had issues in the last 8 weeks, which we think we've seen the worst, and then now we've learned from that, so we can be more preventative going forward. But at the same time, we can't get off of that safety routine and regimen, right? So there's not a particular area where we see the risk. I would say of all places, likely the warehouse is the biggest risk wherever it happens in the chain, whether it is in our supplier warehouse or a cross-dock location of a 3PL or our own warehouse, because of the number of people who are there. And now with people coming back to work, just the exposure is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the warehouse areas are where I would see more risk.
You mentioned being nimble
Yeah.
in dealing with issues. How important has it been to maintain communication channels open with various suppliers and partners along your e-fulfillment supply chain? Have you adopted any new methods of communication during the crisis? Do you expect these to continue beyond the crisis?
That's a great question, and I could pick it up in a couple of ways, right? I mean, we moved our people to go work online seamlessly, and we were lucky that technology was there, and a lot of others did it too.
Mm-hmm.
A big surprise for us was we were able to see that happen across our supply base all around the world. We source from multiple countries around the world, in Europe, in Asia, and also in the US. And for us, communication cadence has speeded up. So what would have been once a month communication happens once a week. What was once a week happens daily. And I would say the change has happened twofold. One is internal, because the demand is rapidly changing, and e-commerce is such a complex multifunction business. What we are promoting on the website, whether it's through sales promotion or pricing, where we are going a little aggressive some times of the day or some times of the week, we are having to connect internally much faster than we did in the past. So that's internal communication within functions: sales, marketing, e-com, logistics, supply chain planning, manufacturing, all of that, having more frequent discussions every day, which could have been, once every week. And then conversely, taking that and converting it and providing data and insights to our suppliers too. So all of that has speeded up. In terms of methods of communication, it's still kind of the same. We have portals through which we send information to our suppliers. We are just in touch with them more. More frequent emails, more frequent phone calls.
Have you found that some partners or suppliers are just better prepared to really deal with this acceleration, with things becoming more real time than others?
We are finding U.S. domestic suppliers really responding very, very well, very fast. It's been harder from Asia. Some of it is related to their own dealing with, we have suppliers in India, and India is shut down. China was a little slow to come back out of the pandemic when they happened, and then container capacities from overseas has been constrained as well. So some of the domestic ones are able to respond much faster because they don't have those kinds of constraints.
Exactly. So looking ahead, on the positive side, most parts of the country, especially in the less dense urban centers, have started partial reopening of economic, recreational activity. Have you started picking up any additional activity that's related to that? For example, I think as businesses are reopening, they require more cleaning, disinfecting equipment, etc. What kind of scenario do you see unfolding in that regard? And are you working with your transportation providers, product suppliers to plan ahead for a broader reopening of the economy and purchasing behavior?
Right. So for us, our consumer base, our customer base is pretty broad. So we have consumers, we have small businesses, which are landscapers, contractors, and then we have businesses itself, the more commercial businesses. Through the pandemic, we saw the commercial side of the business was slower. The consumer and small businesses was pretty robust. So we expect the commercial side of the business to start to pick up as things are opening up. In terms of what we need to do differently is making sure that we are signaling appropriately to all our partners. We see less risk from a transportation standpoint. We see more risk on suppliers being able to supply parts and components. As the country opens up, more people are getting exposed, more people are coming out. We're not saying that there is going to be general dropping of the guard, but there is a tendency for that. And that would then result in some spotty plants being closed for our suppliers and parts not being available. So that's what we anticipate to happen and we saw that even when the auto industry started to open up. General Motors had to shut down within 3 days of starting because they didn't have parts. So those kinds of things we expect to happen quite a bit.
So how are you building resilience then into your supply chain from that standpoint?
I think the most important one is frequency of communication and staying close to our suppliers. I mean, we worry about financial health of our suppliers because not all of them are able to serve their full customer base. And so staying close to that and understanding if they have any needs. So building resiliency through that to make sure suppliers are solvent. And the second one is staying very close to customers so that we can respond to our demand patterns, which are changing rapidly, very quickly as well. So those would be the two things I would say are part of our resiliency plan.
So do you have any final thoughts for us and for our audience today?
Sure. I mean, we covered a lot of ground in the last 15, 20 minutes. I think as I think about, the world is changing and it has changed there's a new normal. People are going to get very comfortable ordering online. Older people are ordering online. More consumer discretionary products will be ordered online. We as a company are adapting and we think we're going to come out stronger because a lot of these things are working in our favor. Things that we have prepared for is being proven. I also think innovation is going to continue to win. So when you think about companies which are winning now, are people either the companies are product innovators or they're process innovators with, buy online, pick up in store, those kinds of things. And there is also a trend where, there are certain countries where we source from is going to be changing. There is definitely a sense of more local versus global, and customers are asking for it. They're definitely more aware of where products are coming from. And this is not an anti-China or anti-Asia kind of feeling, but there is more a pro-US in the United States. We want more US made product. So those are some of the shifts that we see happening. And we are well prepared because we have a good mix across where we source from. And many times we have multiple. So we can balance out the supply chain as needed as the consumer changes and their tastes are changing.
Well, this has been extremely informative. Thank you for your time, and I want to wish you all the best going forward, and also with your position at Northern Tool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hani. It was a pleasure.
Sean, you're VP for supply chain at Macy's, and you joined Macy's in January of 2020, just in time for the pandemic. As VP of supply chain, where you're helping lead a major transformation in Macy's supply chain. And I guess you're currently based out of New York City. And you have responsibility for supplier collaboration, reverse logistics, merge center operations, customer delivery, basically everything that delivers to me, the customer, all these wonderful products that we order. But before, I guess Macy's, you were at Walgreens for approximately 17 years, where most recently you led the U.S. supply chain development. So you've had many years of experience, I guess, with supply chains, and you've seen some disruptions, but probably nothing as severe, I guess, as the current one. And so I'm going to kind of ask you a few questions about when when the lockdown was put in place, the early period versus how things have evolved since then, and kind of what we're looking at in the future. But it's been more than 2 months now since social distancing orders were put into place. And with it, social economic activities have dramatically changed over that time. And of course, Macy's stores had to close down, like most major retail stores. But from my personal experience as a customer, I know that Macy's had a successful omni-channel strategy for several years. You could, you could order online. You had good fulfillment. But given that the initial buying surge was mostly in products that Macy's does not sell, PPEs, health-related, essential grocery goods, was it difficult for you at Macy's to continue meeting customers' purchases, given the pressure in sort of the transportation system to move these probably higher priority goods through the nation's supply chains? And how did that surge initially impact your ability to fulfill your e-commerce business?
Yeah, it's a great question. In terms of the impact of PPE, it really didn't disrupt, our ability to deliver to our customers. I think early on, you had such a rapid decrease in the demand for carrier capacity that as kind of the PPE wave was rising, as was grocery and some other household essentials, everything else was dropping so quickly. So at that point, the supply chain overall really did have the bandwidth to compensate for the upward and downward movement you saw in different sectors.
So I saw recent data, I guess, from Bank of America suggesting increases of anywhere between 80 to 110% in daily online retailing compared to the same time last year. What challenges in e-fulfillment are you experiencing now in your supply chains from, say, first mile to last mile delivery? Is it product availability, sourcing, replenishment, because things are not coming from either the Far East or from Europe? Or is it in the actual moving it out the door and delivering it to the final customer?
Yeah. Right now, it's interesting. In terms of product availability, I wouldn't say that's the major challenge. What I would say is the opportunity is accessing all the pools of inventory that are available to us. Just to your point, with stores being closed, you're essentially, limiting the number of nodes you have to fulfill from. So as our stores have opened and now we've done more in-store fulfillment, the available inventory has become that much greater. And certainly by having not only fulfillment centers, but also, the potential hundreds of stores doing fulfillment, that really opened things up quite a bit for us.
So during the lockdown, you actually were not able to access what is in inventory at the stores.
Not the full portfolio that we normally would, but certainly as we bring, the entire portfolio online, or at least the majority of the portfolio, that's allowed us even greater access to the pool of inventory, which, to your earlier point, allows us to compensate for any type of disruption in inbound flow of product.
So in a way, the crisis brought many new buyers to the online business. What would you say is the split perhaps between first-time buyers, those who are new to Macy's online shops, versus established e-commerce customers? And also, are these first-time online buyers primarily Macy's store shoppers who are now going online, or are they new to Macy's altogether? Do you have a way of breaking this out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that we're quite there yet in terms of what the data is showing. I think, what we are seeing is, we have a great customer base that shops us across the board, whether it's in store or it's online. And we've certainly seen, significant e-commerce growth. So I think we've seen certainly some channel shift, but also I think we are seeing exposure of our brands to a subset of customers that maybe weren't shopping us as frequently. And I think it's an interesting question, and it's going to continue to develop. Right now, to your earlier point, the increase in e-commerce demand can be somewhere between 80 to 120%. And the real question is, how long does that sustain? And what does that look like once more retail outlets come online? And what type of consumer preference changes are we going to see if this is only a couple of months versus something more elongated?
So do you have a feel for what people might be buying in this period? What products are moving that might not otherwise have been moving without the crisis? I mean, everybody's at home. And likewise, I suspect people are not buying evening gowns for graduation or wedding parties. So what kind of shifts in consumer behavior have are you seeing? And how are those affecting your supply chains and fulfillment strategies?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you think about it, people, consumers, they're spending a lot more time at home, right? And that means that they're working out at home. It means that they are working from home. It means that they are trying to find creative ways to help their kids learn, or they're trying to find ways to keep their kids busy so that they can work. And when we think about that, we see increases in active wear, and sleepwear, and kids, and home, and furniture. And if you think about it, there's a large amount of people that are now in this position where they're trying to put together a home office, and they're really looking for those essentials, because at the end of the day, you have all these people that are working from home and they're trying to be productive. So you see that gravitation towards the type of products that drive productivity at home when you think about a home office environment. So challenges from a supply chain, it's quite interesting. We have a very broad supply chain. We certainly have store replenishment, we have direct-to-consumer fulfillment, we have in-store fulfillment, and then we have big ticket, which is furniture and bedding and some of the materials and equipment necessary from a home office perspective. So the challenge really comes into, again, accessing proper pools of inventory, but also making sure that we're leveraging the great relationships we have with our logistics providers and with our carriers to make sure that we can keep up with that demand, regardless of whether it's something small like a small appliance or something for the kids, or it's a new mattress or it's a new furniture to keep them productive at home. It's really balancing all the partnerships.
So have you been able to deliver furniture, for example? Have those channels been available to you?
Yeah, we never stopped. We kept going throughout the entire period. Of course, we took steps with our delivery partners to make sure that we had all the proper processes and protective equipment in place, and our partners are doing what we need them to do. But ultimately, we continue to make sure that we could get that type of furniture and product to our customers.
So you mentioned, I guess, communication with your delivery folks and so on. How important has it been to maintain communication channels open with, on one hand, suppliers, but also, all partners along your e-fulfillment supply chain? Have you adopted any new methods of communication during the crisis? And do you expect these to continue beyond the crisis?
Yeah, communication is critical. If you think about it, this is the stress test of partnerships and relationships. And if you think about it, everybody is under, financial stress at this point. Everybody is trying to navigate the changing landscape that we're operating within. So what we found was, transparency was absolutely critical. And just having very honest and frank conversations with our partners about this is where our business is, this is the steps that we're taking in order to make sure that we can continue to service our customers. And they were very transparent in steps of what they're doing. So by being very transparent about what we're doing and sharing as much information as possible in advance, we found that our partners were more than willing to adapt with us and make adjustments where necessary.
One of the challenges in e-commerce has always been the issue of returns. I guess typical pre-crisis levels were somewhere around 30, 40% or so that items that are returned. So, the so-called reverse logistics problem. Has that been more or less of an issue during the crisis, or has it remained about the same?
Yeah, in some senses, what you hear and what you see is that, the volume right now of e-commerce is approaching peak levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in theory, that means that you're going to start to see peak level returns. And that's normally something that hits you quite hard in January. And, today, most retail outlets, as though they're opening up now, have not been open. So any retail returns that customers normally, even if they bought online or bought in store, they may prefer to return in store. That avenue largely hasn't been available to them. So I suspect that we haven't necessarily made it through the largest part of returns yet. But, similar to how people shop, how they return is changing. So the challenges that that presents is that now, instead of getting a large amount of returns at stores, all of them are going back to fulfillment centers. All of them are going back to vendors that have sent vendor direct shipments. So it presents a challenge, not necessarily in a processing sense, but how do you prioritize that with all the outbound fulfillment that you're doing? Because at the end of the day, resources are finite, so it's a balance.
Exactly. So going back to your omni-channel strategy, do you think your customers will continue their heavy reliance on e-commerce buying, or will they revert to their pre-crisis buying patterns? And in other words, how much of that demand will stick versus go to the stores or evaporate altogether? Or will we see something entirely different, more of a hybrid e-commerce and store purchasing strategy on the part of consumers? What are you planning for?
Yeah, that really is the question. And I think it's going to evolve as more data comes in because we're so early in this. I think what you're likely to see is an evolution, to your point. I think you are seeing consumers and customers that are exposed to a new way of shopping. So you may see some channel shift there. But I think what it's actually going to give way to is an even better hybrid version of what we have today. So certainly you can shop in store, and most shopping in store is now digitally influenced anyway. You can buy online, you can have it sent to your home, you can pick it up in store, you can get it curbside. So I think we're going to see two things happen. One, an evolution of harmony between the different modes of shopping and receiving what's important to you, but then also a growing development in terms of segments of the population that may not have looked to digital before. And that will go across many different categories.
Exactly. So looking ahead, Sean, several parts of the country, especially in the sort of less dense urban centers, have started partial reopening of economic, recreational, retail activities. Have you started picking up any additional activity related to that? And what kind of scenario do you see unfolding in that regard? Are you working with your transportation providers and product suppliers to plan ahead for a broader reopening of the economy and purchasing behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our challenge is similar to most in the sense that, the number of nodes for fulfillment and number of access points for shopping is just going to increase to something similar to what it was before COVID came about. So for us, the situation is really not all that unique. What's different is the predictability in terms of demand. So for us, it's an evolving challenge of how do you position inventory and how do you think about the various fulfillment nodes? Because initial demand is going to be one thing. What happens over the 2 to 4 weeks after, an avenue for shopping is opening is going to be something different. So we're making sure that we maintain agility and flexibility in our network to make sure that we can pulse fulfillment and inventory where we need it.
Are you trying to perhaps learn from those locations that are opening before others, so that you can maybe sort of translate some of these lessons into what you do in other places? For example, I believe Georgia, Atlanta, and so on have been open now for a couple of weeks. Illinois, not a chance. So are you kind of monitoring what happens in one place and maybe extracting some, again, best practices from that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we are, and what you see is the behavior and kind of the result as stores open, regardless of the state, they're quite similar. They
Mm-hmm.
really are. The growth that you see initially and then kind of what happens over the subsequent 1 or 2 weeks, it's quite similar regardless of what state it's in. So we're certainly starting to understand, what the data shows us, and we're starting to understand better of what the trend looks like, which of course is informing how we think about what comes next.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So, Sean, this has been very, very informative to, again, learn about these various challenges and your strategies. Do you have any final thoughts for us?
It's an interesting time, and it's a challenging time, and I think the lesson here is multiple. But I think that the focus that I see is really to maintain flexibility, maintain adaptability, keep your eye on the consumer, take care of your team, but also use this as an opportunity to stress test your supply chain and think about things a little bit differently. And lastly, focus on your partnerships. Focus on building long-standing, lasting partnerships, and use this opportunity to build new partnerships. Certainly this isn't going to be the last challenge that any of us are faced with, but as long as we take this opportunity to learn what we can and better prepare for next time, I think we'll all be in a better position. So really appreciate the time to speak with you, and wish everybody well.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Sean, and wish you all the best going forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thanks. So Saman, you're an industrial engineer by training, and you lead the e-commerce operations for a number of accounts in North America. For DHL. You have been with DHL Solutions team for over 16 years. You've delivered solutions across retail, consumer, technology, automotive, and life sciences sectors. And working with DHL customers, you've implemented transformational and e-commerce projects for many Fortune 500 companies, resulting in supply chain, in reduced supply chain costs, improved service levels. So really, you know e-commerce, e-fulfillment inside out. And so I'd love to explore with you how e-commerce supply chains have been impacted through the COVID-19 crisis. And we're going to take this maybe in 3 parts. We're going to start with the first part during, say, March and April initially. It's been nearly 2 months since social distancing orders were put in place. And with it, social and economic activities have dramatically changed over this time. There clearly was a surge in e-commerce, specialized needs, PPEs, health-related, essential home goods, and also regular items that one could no longer get in stores. What was the approximate magnitude of that surge, and how did your e-commerce accounts how were those affected, and how were you able to fulfill the demands of your customers during that period?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hani. Yeah, I mean, we saw about 40 to 50% growth in net e-commerce sales in various markets such as fashion, apparel, home goods. And we saw from Target recently, they announced last quarter, their sales went up by 141%. And they said average day was basically, they were fulfilling more orders than they were at Cyber Monday last year, which is quite amazing. Pre-COVID, the penetration of grocery sales, for example, with e-commerce was only 3 to 4%. And the regular market category is typically around 16% or so. And we're seeing that grocery is also catching up to that kind of market penetration as well. So quite a bit of growth and quite a bit of excitement around the e-commerce market vertical.
So what particular health-related challenges did DHL operations experience? Any special protocols for drivers or sorting facility employees that pose particular challenges?
Yeah, our main concern is really the health and safety of our employees, and then fulfilling our customer needs and their SLAs on time. So really what we did was we immediately implemented a number of measures into our building around regular disinfecting of high-touch areas. We have now mandatory temperature checking, wearing masks at all of our distribution centers. And also we have a global tool where we track if there has been a positive COVID case at a particular site, and really are able to react very quickly by deploying resources to that particular site, disinfect it, and get it back up and running. We also have a very strict policy around daily and regular audit around some of the COVID cleaning schedule we put in place. Monitor that on a daily and weekly basis and report it to our sector president on a weekly basis, and in fact to our board, and ensure that really all these practices remain in place while we deal with this situation.
So what would you say were the most challenging operational aspects during that March-April period? Was it too much demand in markets where you may not have had the capacity? Is it issues at sorting facilities and nodes, or is it finding capacity to move the packages, either long haul or in terms of local distribution and last mile?
Sure. I mean, we're used to e-commerce surge in volume, but the challenge here was there was no forecast for it. We weren't planning on such a surge in volume. So really, the challenge was the volume went up, but at the same time, we're trying to minimize the number of associates in the building to encourage and ensure social distancing. So not only the capacity of the buildings have gone down, but the demand has gone up. But we've been able to deal with that really well. As I said, we put in those practices in place, and there are still a lot of great associates willing and ready to work at these buildings. And we've been able to keep up with the demand. Where we've seen other challenges is also not only around the fulfillment side of it, is around the final mile. A lot of the courier companies cannot keep up with the demand as much and provide as much capacity into our buildings with additional trucks to keep up and make deliveries. So I would say it's from the beginning all the way to the end, there's been capacity constraints, but all in all, everyone's working well together. And you know, most of the fulfillment centers, I would say, speaking in general, outside of DHL as well, have been able to keep up with demand and fulfill volume because we're always ready for that kind of Cyber Monday and peak season. We just had to kind of accelerate that a little bit.
So at the worst of the sort of the crisis, when you were encountering these capacity issues in terms of delivery and so on, how would you kind of resolve those? Just wait, or were there other things that you were doing to make sure that package was actually getting there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done a number of things. So we've implemented a number of tools, which we had in place pre-COVID, quite honestly. This wasn't something we did for COVID in particular, around kind of end-to-end supply chain visibility. We call it DHL My Supply Chain, which provides visibility around you know, where the order is from when it was clicked and downloaded from order management system into WMS all the way from when it's delivered, as well as looking at analytics and predictive analytics to see which SKUs will have more demand rather than kind of waiting for it to find out certain SKUs are either on promotion or high demand and have to react quickly on the spot. So try to kind of get ahead of it because again, we are used to something like this. This is pretty common with e-commerce for us. We just had to kind of bring it forward into first quarter and now second quarter, as opposed to having to do it during Thanksgiving.
So looking at the latter part of the crisis, so the more like the current situation, say late April and May, has the demand surge subsided somewhat, or are you still operating at levels much above last year's or pre-COVID crisis? Is it different in terms of the kinds of goods that are moving, possibly less health related, back to more discretionary types of goods, apparel, electronics, sports equipment?
Yeah, I think we've seen increasing volume with e-commerce across all channels, quite honestly. Fashion, apparel, sports equipment, all of those categories, furniture, for example, and home goods, they're all up. We haven't seen it go down, quite honestly. We expect it actually to continue to be steady volume throughout the end of year, throughout Christmas and Thanksgiving as well. Of course, some of it will likely go down as more and more stores open up. But also I've seen a recent poll where people were asked if they would be ready or willing to go into stores, and the answer was, or for half of them, they said no. So they're not really ready to go back to stores, and therefore you start switching more and more to e-commerce. So we expect and are in fact planning to have steady volume from now all the way to the end of the year for e-commerce.
So in the current environment, what challenges in e-fulfillment are your business customers experiencing in their supply chains from first mile to last mile delivery? Is it sourcing, for example, not enough product coming from China or Asia or other sources? Or is it production, for example, companies that make prescription glasses, I'm speaking from personal experience here, or is it in the delivery process?
Yeah. I mean, we haven't seen a whole lot of sourcing challenges yet because a lot of the customers we deal with, they have both the retail as well as the e-com channel. So they've been able to divert the store inventory into the e-commerce channel. In fact, we've been dealing with situations where we've been looking and helping our customers with short-term needs for inventory because the stores are closed and net the volume is down. So even though e-com has significantly increased, but the overall demand for many retailers is less. So sourcing hasn't really been particularly an issue with most. I would say, being able to attract labor and on the fulfillment side as well as on the last mile, as I said before, a lot of the companies are challenged with keeping up with the demand is the biggest watch out for us.
Okay. So, Saman, you talked already about tracking, real-time visibility, predictive analytics. Staying with the technology theme, has robotics and automation supported the surge in e-commerce, both short-term and long-term?
Yeah, it's been tremendous, actually. We work with various companies, including Locus with AMR or autonomous mobile robots. And what it does for us is because you can increase your prod 70, 80% or sometimes 100%, that means you need that many less people, right? So if you have less people in the aisles and you have more bots, automatically you're looking at social distancing. So we've been actually looking at accelerating that for some of our customers that were considering it to have it in place this year prior to peak so we can actually process more volume and being able to still ensure that social distancing aspect of it. So it's been tremendous.
So looking ahead, near, medium term, also longer term, all the transportation logistics companies that we've talked to have stressed to us the importance of maintaining communication channels open with partners and customers during the crisis. Have you adopted any new methods of communication, of tracking, and so on, or did you pretty much have those already in place pre-COVID? Do you expect these to continue sort of to play an important role beyond the crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have established new communication with our customers. So on a weekly basis, we receive communication from our board around what are the new measures we're taking that we share with our customers around COVID. So we get that on a daily basis, actually internally, but on a weekly basis, we provide a summary of that to our customers. And the tool we've created in our Power BI online tool allows us to also track and see where we have a leave of absence for employees, also where we have positive cases. So we can report on that immediately on a daily basis to our customers as well, should we need to do that. And we expect that to continue. This is going to be the new norm for us, probably for the next 6 months to a year, if not longer.
Mm-hmm. Someone, both anecdotal evidence, personal experience, I guess, and data suggests that many people have either started buying online or dramatically increased the variety and quantity of their online purchases. And in fact, some of the latest data I saw had something in the range of 90 to 110% increase in daily online retailing volumes relative to the same days last year. You mentioned the experience with Target. It seems to be really across the board for companies that have a strong online presence. Do you foresee a lasting shift to e-commerce purchases from customers, or will they sort of revert to their pre-crisis buying patterns? And how much of that additional demand do you think might be retained over time?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's something we're all trying to find the answer to, but we expect this to continue. We believe that the trend of buying more online will continue forever. I mean, we were experiencing double-digit growth year over year for online demand already, but we expect that to grow further. So if you look at overall category, 16% of products or sales are coming from online, and the rest from brick and mortar and stores. And we expect that to grow to a much higher number. And instead of the 12 to 15% growth a year, we expect that to be above 20% a year. But it's really hard to tell at this point. I think it depends on when we can actually go back to normal, if that's ever going to happen. But on certain categories like grocery that I mentioned before, it used to be only 3 to 4% market penetration. And we think that's changing forever. Personal experience, I never bought anything online grocery, and now that's all I do. So I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest categories that we're going to continue to see that shift. And we expect it to catch up very quickly with the rest of the categories to be around the 16 to 20% mark.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly a lot of challenging questions ahead in that space. Looking ahead, several parts of the country, I mean, the US as well as North America, especially in the less dense urban centers, have started either full or partial reopening of economic and recreational activity. Have you started picking up any additional activity related to that, or possibly it could be a reduction, maybe because people can go and to stores? That I would assume that small business owners are themselves ordering product online at this point. So what kind of scenario do you see unfolding in that regard? Are you working with your business partners to plan ahead for a broader reopening of the economy, or are you pretty much going to be reacting to whatever happens?
Yeah, we work with our customers quite closely around which stores are opening, which regions. We've ramped down the volume for a lot of those kind of store fulfillment DCs just because the volume isn't there. So we've seen that to start and pick up slowly, but nothing close to what we experienced before. And from e-commerce perspective, I can tell you that volume hasn't really decreased. So I think to my earlier point that people are somewhat worried to walk into the stores, and the demand for those stores are fairly low. And I've even seen it in some markets where they're allowed to open stores, but certain companies have decided to still keep it open because if you don't expect a lot of foot traffic, you might as well focus on your e-commerce channel. So not a lot of activities yet around the brick and mortar. But we are working closely with them, and the plan is to open almost all the stores fairly soon, at least in the U.S. But the volume is still quite low compared to before.
Is Canada fairly similar to the U.S. in that regard?
It is. I think Canada is a bit more strict, especially in Ontario and Quebec. We still have a lot of cases. British Columbia is a little bit better in terms of that situation, but we're seeing stores also opening up with a lot of restrictions. But you can tell when you kind of drive by and you see a lot of stores still relatively empty and everyone's still buying online. I see a lot of trucks delivering packages in front of people's homes. So I think it's very similar, but we're a little bit behind the curve, I would say.
Okay. Saman, do you have any final thoughts for us and our audience today?
Yeah, no, it's just, it's obviously a very sad situation we are with COVID and a lot of lives affected. But in terms of e-commerce, it's very interesting. It's helped us accelerate our growth and focus on deploying new technologies and robotics like we discussed as well. So that is really our focus. And like I said, we know this is going to stay for a long time. So we've put in long-term measures around employee safety and making sure that we can deal with this situation as we see more and more volume and as we're going to see more during peak season as well. So that's really our focus here.
Great. Thank you very much for your time, Saman. This has been very informative, and I hope that we'll be able to get an update from you and reconnect at some point in the future. Thank you very much.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Hani.
Thank you. So this should bring us to the live portion of our roundtable. Just give it a few minutes here to get set up. Okay, excellent. So welcome everyone. I'm pleased to have with us today our three panelists. So we do have Suresh, who just joined us, Sean, and Saman. Thank you all again for being here with us. We also have Brett Johnson, who is Senior Associate Director at the Northwestern University Transportation Center. And Brett has been monitoring the Q&A line, so he will be sharing some of these questions and directing them to our speakers. Brett, you wanna start?
Sure. This is a question from Craig Phillip, and I'd like to address it to all the panelists. Maybe we can start. We can go in the order of our interviews, so we'll start with Suresh. But Craig asked, he said, where do you see placing a priority on employee safety negatively impacting delivery expected delivery? Let me say it again. Where do you see placing priority on employee safety negatively impact delivering expected service to your customers? Sorry, I screwed that up the first time.
If I understand the question right, is there a priority between employee safety and delivering to our customers?
Or how do you balance it?
How do you balance? I think I would say employee safety first. If we had to be in a situation where we are going to fail a customer delivery because we had a DC where we had a situation and we had to shut it down, we would obviously make every effort to inform the customer appropriately, explain to them what the situation is, and let them know that we are prioritizing employee safety in that location, and ask for their forgiveness. If there's anything we can do to mitigate for them, we would do that, but employee safety would go first.
Sean, would you like to address that?
Yeah, and I think I agree with Suresh's point. I think there's probably a proactive and a reactive approach to that. I think just in terms of proactive transparency with your customers, in terms of what they can expect, how long it's going to take based on the current circumstance to get them whatever they're looking for. And then, second to that, when there is a situation that comes in and disrupts what the expectation is, I think, again, it's just proactive communication and keeping the customer up to date in terms of when they can expect to receive what it is they ordered. I think they're really just looking for transparency. I think there is an understanding that, service in many cases right now is just going to be a bit longer than that.
Saman, is this a question you can address as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with the other two gentlemen as well. I mean, safety of our employees is our top priority. Fortunately, the customers we're dealing with understand and accept that as well, and it is the same for them as well. So we've been able to put in the social distancing and all the practices in place by working with our customers closely, and also redefining some of the forecasts based on the revised capacity of these buildings, and been able to adjust our plan accordingly, because again, you can't have too many people in the same aisle. So And that's when technologies come into play and support us, such as AMR, Locust, and Six River technologies, where you need less people and more bots in these aisles. But the safety has always been a priority, and fortunately, like I said, our customers understand that. So we've redefined the capacity of our buildings and communicate that on a daily basis with our customers, so they're aware of it. And sometimes we've been able to add, maybe a third shift and have staggered shifts in place to minimize the interaction of employees, and other practices we have in place to ensure safety. But that's how we've been able to handle that.
We thought we'd give you an easy one first. So Brett, do you want to continue?
Yeah, so Luis has a question directed to Sean, but I'd like to direct it to both Sean and Suresh, but we'll start with Sean. And he asks, do you think there's an optimal balance between warehouse delivery and ship from store? Are you able to do ship from store during the pandemic? I think you kind of addressed that during your remarks, Sean, but could you address it again?
Yeah. So I think that's an evolving model. So I think the way I look at it is quite simply, you have existing assets, right? And you need to figure out how to get the most productivity out of those assets, regardless of whether it's a fulfillment center or it's a store, because in essence, assets or fulfillment nodes now. We have been using both our fulfillment centers and our stores for fulfillment. I think the customer is changing a bit right now. So it's not enough just to have traditional fulfillment and also store fulfillment. You really have to start to layer on convenience options that come along with store fulfillment, whether that is curbside pickup or that is same-day delivery. So we've benefited from the flexibility to be strategic in terms of where we fulfill across our nodes.
Suresh, what's been your experience?
We've been doing, primarily we have been shipping only from our DCs, and about 6 months ago, we started allowing buy online, pick up in store. And more recently, it's buy online, pick up curbside. We are only piloting in a small area, same day delivery. So you order and you get it delivered to your construction site or your home. We do see a big shift for these options. So if I were to make a guess, it's too early for us when you look at the data patterns right now. If I were to make a guess, I would see that the consumer choice is going to drive where this goes. With the convenience of being able to pick up the same day versus something coming from a DC takes a couple of days. Unless there is going to be a significant price penalty, it's going to shift more and more towards the more convenient option, which I think is give it to me same day, give it to me. I can drive and pick it up if that's faster, or if you can bring it to my home or my construction site, that's going to be the preferred choice. So we are definitely preparing for those options to be more predominant in the future.
If I may follow up on this question, would either of you then possibly be rethinking or redesigning kind of your fulfillment strategies and your distribution strategies based on the experience during this crisis?
I don't know, Sean, you want to go first, or I could go?
Go ahead.
We have started to. We are a much smaller footprint store than a Macy's would be, and most stores, as you know, are not really designed to be warehouses. But we are definitely trialing formats where we would have a larger space for having storage at the store location. The challenge is the equipment. The warehouse equipment is big and bulky, and how do you use that and bring storefront stuff from the back room, so to say. But we are definitely looking at what I would call a hub and spoke kind of arrangement, where there might be a store in a market region that is larger and has the ability to stock some fast moving goods, and then use that to provide that available in that particular market region. Even though the customer may think it's coming from the store that's closest to them, it might be coming from the larger store, which is the hub and servicing the spoke. And we are looking at similar arrangements. We're trialing that again in Texas right now. We think there are other market areas for us which would be convenient and suitable to try some of those strategies.
To build on that, I think the current situation hasn't changed the modeling approach. It's just potentially augmented some of the parameters. So if you think about it, you're generally speaking always going to be most productive in a fulfillment center, right? You just have efficiencies, automation, processes, etc. And fulfilling orders in a store can be a challenge because of where product is located, multiple tasks that you're trying to perform in addition to fulfilling orders. So I think this has, again, changed some of the parameters, and it's accelerated the conversation, both at Macy's and other places, about what is deemed to be efficient in terms of store fulfillment. And to the point that Suresh was making is how much progress or advancement are we going to see in more flexible fulfillment automation that can be applied in a more traditional store setting, whether it's a slice of the sales floor or it's in a back room.
Yep. If I can add a comment there as well. Just from our experience, we work with so many retailers as well, and the biggest challenge around store fulfillment versus DC has been with order management system and inventory visibility. So as the consumer is placing the order, having that live visibility to store inventory and being able to direct it to the appropriate node, which might be a store in this case, has been also a big challenge. And I think a lot of retailers who had figured that out prior have been able to benefit from that during the COVID as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought I would share that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more in terms of as the sort of share of in-store to online maybe shifting more in favor of the online, whether that would call for sort of reconfiguring essentially the fulfillment part of it and the configuration of the distribution channels. So thank you. Brett, you want to move to the next question?
Yeah, a question from Maya that kind of picks up in that same direction is, of what operations that may have changed during the COVID situation, do you see any of these becoming more permanent? Any new strategies you're taking to fulfill your omni-channel customers? And do you see these potentially extending beyond when the COVID situation goes away?
Yeah, I think maybe the optimization piece of it is what's interesting, because I think there's really two components here, and maybe there is a slice of optimization, a slice of risk mitigation, because ultimately what you have to be even more mindful of now than before is really where your different pools of inventory reside. How do you find the appropriate balance of spreading out your inventory to alleviate any type of disruption to your supply chain, but while also not drastically increasing the amount of inventory that you carry in order to do so. So I think that's probably the incremental effort that's been applied based on what we've seen in the past 2.5 months.
I would throw something back from an academic standpoint. It would be great if we found a way to, is there a way to incent customer behavior towards what would be more optimal for us for a particular item that's being ordered. It's a little more esoteric when I say it this way, but it's really hard to get a total cost perspective on which is the best way to service a particular order as it's happening when the customer is just on the checkout, for example. If there is quick ways for us to model and then throw up, I don't know if it's an incentive to force a customer to actually wait a couple of days and let the product come from the DC, or maybe make an incentive saying this is a slow moving item, I have tons of inventory, actually give them an incentive to take same day delivery from the store. Those are all things that from an optimization, cost service optimization on that curve, tools don't exist today. We just talked about how difficult it is to even know connecting the order management system to inventory, but if you were to take it to all the way, that would be utopia for people in academia. If you could think of ways where something can be built that we could trial and pilot and we could use.
That's very interesting. Saman?
Yeah, I think in terms of the question, was changed permanently from fulfillment side, it's still too early to really draw a conclusion around has the order profile truly changed as well. I have a suspicion some of the basket size has increased because previously maybe you bought a few things in the store and now you're buying everything online. But in terms of, within the four walls and how we fulfill things, like I said before, we've put in different shift patterns in place. There's a lot of social distancing, and from the actual material handling perspective, we're looking at a minimized capacity essentially, because again, you have less people in the operation. So I believe the utilization of AMR technology, autonomous mobile bots, and more automation has become relevant, and it's helped expedite the ROI, both because you have higher volume and as well as, again, the social distancing aspect of it. So I think a lot of that will become permanent for these e-com distribution centers.
Brett, you have more good questions?
Yeah, I'm going to slightly change a question from an anonymous caller, but keep it essentially the same. The question is, pre-COVID, the trend in e-fulfillment was faster and faster. Second day service to overnight service to same day and even 2-day delivery windows. Have customer expectations for delivery times changed during COVID? And if so, how? And do you think this will be a permanent shift?
I guess that last one was 2-hour probably window, not 2-day.
Well,
it was getting tighter and
2-day,
tighter.
then it went, yes, yeah. Then to same day, and I added 2-hour window.
Yeah.
So have you seen changes in expectations during the last several weeks? And do you think these are going to stick?
I'll go first. We have not seen a significant change. I think those patterns of things being needed faster was there in the environment. It's just the number of people who want it now and are kind of demanding it is gone up, particularly in categories like ours where, our customers, particularly the business customer, would be willing to wait a couple of days and they know that they have to order ahead of time or plan for it. I think, our availability and what we've proven to them in the last 6 to 8 weeks that we can deliver same day, we can deliver within a couple of hours, deliver from the store versus shipping from our warehouse. All of that is giving them ideas, I think, that is accelerating this shift. But none of those trends are new. The trends were there. And we believe, it'll continue to go down that path, including, if you just talk about customer being served in faster and a better way, bring the product to me, bring it faster. That is something that's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, if I can add to that as well, I would agree with Suresh. And I think consumer expectations hasn't really changed. And if anything, we want things faster because we can't really go and buy it from the store. But also people have been more understanding also in terms of realizing that, fulfillment centers, there's less people at the fulfillment centers, there's more volume, the last mile aspect is overwhelmed as well. So I think, and we're not a retailer, but just kind of secondhand, there hasn't been a lot of complaints about, why is this being delayed, etc. Just because people have been understanding of the situation. But I think the trend will continue, like Suresh said, towards people wanting it faster and faster. And I think as everyone realizes what's the capacity with the new norm, and maybe add more capacity through various aspects, adding nodes, fulfill from store, technology at the DC, everyone's goal will be to fulfill, same day and next day as well. So more important than before, I think, because we just don't have access to stores anymore.
John, is something you care to comment on?
I think right now the point about, customers being more tolerant and understanding, I think is correct. I would suspect that that's temporary at best. I do think you're going to see, because of the challenge of the last mile right now, depending on how long that continues, I do think you're going to find a larger percentage of the population than pre-COVID that is interested in placing an order earlier or being incentivized to delay receipt of a product. And I think historically, the encouragement or the reasoning that customers were open to those things were more from a convenience perspective. I think now there's going to be a growing sentiment that if there's something really, really important to me, I'm going to need to take some action earlier. So I think, coming back to transparency to customers to say, look, if you want it by this date, you have to do this by this date. So I think we'll get better visibility in the near term. Long term, I suspect that we'll go right back to where we were in terms of our growing expectation of speed. But I would say that, speed is probably 50% of what customers want. The other 50% is predictability. So whether it is I want it today or tomorrow, or I want it on Wednesday, and you can guarantee me I get it on Wednesday, I think it's kind of half and half. I don't think it's all just about speed right now.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that people were more patient and I guess use the term tolerant. I think that people were more desperate, frankly. It's like there was a period in here, I'm thinking, say, late March, for example, or mid to late March, if you wanted to order certain items, basically we're told, yes, you place your order, you get it in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And that was, and people had to accept, or you don't have the product. I mean, it was for some categories, it was just was not available, or nobody was willing to deliver it sooner. But so that I think that there may have been a point of desperation there, which is not necessarily indicative of individual preferences, but more of the constraints. This case, and as these constraints are removed, indeed, as you mentioned, we're going to go back to the expectations and the predictability of it, which is extremely important in this case. Thank you. So Brett, you have more questions?
As Steve Brown asks, looking ahead, will last mile deliveries to urban consumers be fed by stores and warehouses within the urban center or without? Do you see a trend one way or the other? Does anybody want to address that?
I think in some cases you already have that today. So I think there's the view of an urban fulfillment center today, which is more or less a store or a dark store. It seems like that question is really more around, are you going to have true fulfillment within urban centers? And I think it's an interesting question, but it somewhat seems like, whether it's a pure play or it's or a true omni-channel retailer, it does seem like the stores are being purposed for that. And I think we'll see, over time, a reduction in sales force space, repurposing of that space, for fulfillment activities. So I think in certain urban centers, in certain circumstances, the purpose of the store will continue to evolve as MHE starts to catch up with demand. But I think it'll be interesting to see how close fulfillment needs to be to an urban center. Does it need to be within a mile, or is 30 miles okay?
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Sean said, and also add to that that we're actually investing money into urban centers as well, but there are only limited number of urban centers in the U.S. that would perhaps justify a dedicated facility or any sort of inventory deployed there. So I think store is the answer ultimately. And like Sean said, a lot of companies are looking at deploying actually automation at the store in the back room, whether that's kind of a small kind of micro fulfillment center with small multi-shuttle technology for grocery chains. We see that in Toronto as well. So I think it's really repurposing the existing infrastructure and the inventory that's already deployed is really the future for this type of trend, I think.
Suresh, any thoughts on
to address that, or is that not really apply in your case?
Oh, it absolutely applies, and I concur with Sean and Saman on that. It's we will likely, in our case, it'll be mostly stores, So our footprint of stores will likely have to change. I think I commented earlier, as we don't have larger stores like Macy's does. Our stores are typically 25,000 square feet. And the ones where we are experimenting, the hub and spoke that I talked about, are in urban centers. It's in Houston, and we're experimenting with a larger store footprint, which is probably 40,000 square feet. So, that's kind of concepts that we are trying. And being a mid-size retailer, our model will be a little different than the larger retailers. But we are definitely watching a lot of the bigger ones and learning from them as well. And we've seen what some others like Target have done, where they're definitely using their storefront, the back room in the stores for storage and fulfillment. So we are watching this space pretty carefully, and we believe the stores will have a larger role.
Hani, we have a couple of, thank you, Suresh. Hani, we have a couple of questions that are addressed specifically to our panelists individually, and we have a couple of questions related to shipping and operational costs. Well, I can target one of those, but I wanted to ask you if you've got one that you've been waiting to ask. And if not, I'd be happy to ask one.
No, let's continue with the audience questions. I have a quick one at the end, but that's all.
Okay, all righty. Okay, so this is from Krishna towards Salman. He asks, given the lack of last mile freight data movement at any level available to the public sector, have companies like DHL thought about selling this data, movement, commodities, modes, at any granularity level to public agencies to inform infrastructure decisions? So it's about selling data that can help planners and agencies plan.
I'll try to answer that as best as I can. You know, we're on the DHL supply chain side of our company. So actually, DHL doesn't do domestic deliveries in the U.S. and Canada. So that's not something we do or have as much visibility to that data. Typically, for our operations, we partner with through our customers, actually, with some of the common carrier companies such as FedEx, UPS, etc. I think that's something in other regions. I've seen us collaborate in Europe with the government agencies to talk about how we could build additional infrastructure, and in some cases essentially get some grant and funding to help build that. But not so much in US and Canada, just because we don't really do that type of business here as much. Hopefully that helped answer the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a question for everyone. So the question is from El Nguyen. Companies have to apply the COVID preventative measures at their workplace. How has this impacted any of your operational costs?
I mean, I can speak to that. It definitely has had incremental cost, and really depends on the type of operation. But we're talking about PPE. We're talking about rigorous cleaning schedule that's now even outsourced. We have cleaning crew come in. Definitely we've seen an increased cost in there, and we've been working very closely with our customers to solve for that. A negative impact to all of us from that perspective, but I think a lot, our customers have been great partners in also understanding that with the increased volume and needing to get these products out the door, I think the bigger value is to move the inventory and still maintain the sales and not sit on inventory like, the brick and mortar type retailers would. In a lot of cases, we've seen retailers ask us to bring in additional outside storage capability because the inventory is not being depleted fast enough. So I think a lot of time we've seen that retailers are actually quite happy that the e-com volume is moving, and And those costs have been absorbed at this point. It's just cost of doing business. So yes, an increased cost. I can't quantify it for you at this point, and it varies quite honestly from a grocery e-com operations is quite different than let's say fashion apparel. But we've seen that, and it's been cost of business for both for us and the customer at this point.
I would agree with Saman. We've seen increases in all aspects of the business. As an essential retailer, our stores are open, our warehouses obviously are open. So we are taking all the safety precautions in every area of business where we have employees present. Most of our headquarters employees are working from home, but warehouse, the cost of distancing and having people work different kind of shift patterns to avoid coming too close and not having too many people together. And then in the stores, having these safety precautions for our customers and our employees. And then in situations where we may have had to do some deep cleaning, normal cleaning has gone up, those costs have gone up. But if you run into a situation where you had a positive case, you're having to do even more what I would call a higher level of cleaning. And those, you need to bring in crews from outside, and they are significantly more expensive. And if you think of a DC where the kinds of DCs that someone would run, or their network would run, 1 million square foot, and if you don't have a way to isolate a small place, these costs for deep cleaning run $1.50 to $2 per square foot. So if you had situations, even if it was 1 or 2, it significantly impacts your cost structure very quickly. So as a result, there is significant investments being made in preventative, right? These thermometers, or thermal scans and things like that, which normally we wouldn't buy. But when you weigh out the cost of one incident and how high it is, it's well worth the investment to make sure that we don't have any case anywhere near our facility.
Sean, do you have anything to add?
I agree with what they both said. I think, a lot of those are kind of the direct costs or within your organization costs. I think the other challenge is that you're also, you have to be cognizant you're somewhat susceptible to any of those challenges popping up for any of your suppliers or your logistics partners. Because ultimately, if you have a disruption at one of your providers, you have a disruption at one of your delivery partners, at the end of the day, you now are inheriting the challenge that presents them, and you're managing the communication to your customer base, and you're thinking of alternatives, which ultimately are going to introduce incremental costs to find a solution to get to your customers.
So, of course, accountants will figure this out eventually, and we'll have, they'll have numbers for everything. If one wants to, and I'm not asking anything specific about your business, businesses, but if one wanted some number of, what is the what's the overhead cost that one is looking at because of health precautions? Is this adding 5%? Is it adding 10%? Is it adding 20%? What's kind of a order of magnitude here in terms of kind of at the margin? What is this adding to operating costs? And again, nothing specific direct to your company, but if I were to, a student was doing some calculation and wanted to use a markup for additional health costs, what would that be?
I think that's a tough one. This is not speaking from actual P&L perspective for DHL, because quite honestly, this is still fresh for us. But I would say at least 10 to 20%. And then you have circumstances where Suresh talked about deep cleaning, that's even more significant. But I would say on a regular basis, the other thing that's happening is your facility throughput is reduced. So you have a bigger fixed cost against the lower volume. So not only you have all the cleaning aspect, but you have less volume against the same infrastructure. But that aside,
I'm not even, I don't necessarily want to get into that aspect, but sort of all else being equal, I guess, and things are not equal. But if you're looking at what cleaning is adding, but you're absolutely right about this other side of it, and the taking the fixed costs and how you amortize that. And I don't want to get into that necessarily. Just the sort of the cleaning markup. What would that be?
Are you talking about just cleaning supplies? Are you talking about the labor involved in cleaning?
Labor, no, labor involved, obviously. I mean, that's operating costs, right?
But if you think about it, I mean, it's really a complex one. I wish I could give you an easy answer, and maybe Sean has the magic bullet here. But you know, if you think of stores, we shortened our hours of working so that we could use our people to clean, and we shortened 2 hours. What do you do with that hours? Where do you charge it to?
I would include that in
okay,
yeah,
good. Thank you.
We
also, when somebody fell sick, we gave them 2 weeks of paid COVID-related, you know, time
that would
off.
be part of it as well. Yeah.
So you start adding all this. It is a big number. Yeah. I wish I could tell you what it is. We need to calculate all that. But I mean, those are all the costs. When someone said it's a big number, like 10, 20, 30%, it is a big number when you add all of these aspects of it. Yeah. And we're not even talking about supplies, because supplies are constrained. Getting these chemicals, sometimes you're having to pay a premium to get these chemicals. Other than Clorox and Ecolab, there aren't too many companies who are benefiting from that kind of purchases. So, you know, there's lots of elements. It is costing quite a bit. And public companies which have reported recently have shared more data on the kinds of costs they are having to incur to support this. In many cases in stores, they're adding labor to clean clean the carts. That is incremental labor, 2 to 3 people in every store in big box retailers.
Yeah, and also some restaurants, for example, are putting a surcharge on these orders to cover, let's say, cleaning costs. And if anything, I thought the surcharges were too low. From my limited experience there, because indeed, you know, there would be I mean, I could think of all of these different elements that might go into it, but it'd just be helpful to have a kind of a ballpark number that would not be too far off the mark. Sean?
That's a tricky question. I think if you think about it, go back to before March 13th, right? So think of January to February. I'm sure a good percentage of people listening were trying to figure out how to expedite product in China and other places, right? And then one day later, they were trying to figure out how to stop the flow of certain types of product. So there's a lot of costs that happened before the U.S. kind of entered the phase that we're in that really is kind of lost sight. It was mentioned by Suresh, I think the impact on the suppliers, that was significant, still significant. If you were to look at it, you could figure out, you know, what were the direct costs, the equipment, the cleaning products, productivity, and all that stuff. The larger number that's going to dwarf all of that is going to be the opportunity cost, right? What was the cost of shutting down stores? What was the cost of limiting the amount of orders you could fill? Those numbers are going to dwarf anything that was spent in terms of cleaning products and activities. It's really the lost business.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, but that's a different, I guess, part of it. Which is, I mean, if you want to look at the total COVID-19 impact, that's one thing. If one is saying we're operating and we're doing business, we just have to have extra cleaning procedures, PPEs, sanitizer, etc. You know, what is that adding? Is what I'm thinking of. But absolutely, if you now are looking at the whole, you know, economic impact, that's a much bigger issue and problem, of course. Okay, Brett, do you have any other good questions?
Well, I like this question from Michael Mand. He says it was quoted at a rail conference this past year that Class 1 railroads through precision scheduled railroading must adapt and change to be more conducive to delivering a right now product for the new generation. Besides consistent on-time service, do you have any suggestions for rail to help better integrate into e-commerce? If any of you deal with rail supply chains. If not, we can move on.
I don't. I would say it's the opposite trend of the gig economy and you know, trying to be more nimble with the final mile, which I think is the trend with the way Amazon's doing that. Uber announced you know, that new service as well. So I think that really you know, minimizes the cost for the companies, as well as bring in service and predictability, which is something is very difficult to do with the rail infrastructure. So I would say it's the opposite trend of that, but that's just my opinion. I don't have any more insights.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I think,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I think the maybe one way to think about it is, the spend on last mile is going to continue to increase, right? So demand for first and middle mile may be down, which I think you probably find to be the case now. But knowing that there's only going to be a certain amount of value you can pull out of the last mile, going to be look at more efficient ways to move product through the first 2/3 of your supply chain. So, I think there's probably downward pressure on rail pricing right now. But ultimately, I do think there needs to be continued infrastructure investment to accommodate more aggressive speed in terms of rail. There is some options, some faster trains, all that fun stuff. But I think rail and over the road is where big shippers are going to be looking for value in the coming years to help offset the incremental expenses going into last mile.
Hani, I'd like to hand it over to you for a
Okay, all right. So it's not actually a question, but I was struck in this conversation that particularly with someone's answers that you're going back to Cyber Monday as a reference. Okay, it's more than Cyber Monday, more than Cyber Monday. Are we ready to call it a COVID Tuesday or some other name here that will kind of characterize this period and possibly create sort of a new benchmark, against which we compare the level of activity? And I just want to see if you have any thoughts on that, and what would that be?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to tell, quite honestly, because even though retail, brick and mortar have started to open up in different regions, people haven't gone back to stores yet, right? So we are planning right now against this type of e-com volume all the way from now to the end of the year and perhaps beyond that. So for us, it's somewhat permanent, if you can call it that, next 6, 7, 8 months. But there's definitely going to be a dip in volume for e-commerce once people actually feel comfortable and start going back to the stores, and perhaps even missing that social aspect of, being maybe at the mall or just kind of strolling down. The weather is nicer too. So I think we will see a reduction in volume. And also as we see longer lead time with some of the products, maybe larger products, with the last mile kind of being behind. Again, from fulfillment side, I believe most are kind of up to speed or maybe a day behind, but last mile is where we're lagging a little bit. And as Sean said, the predictability is not there either. You would see more and more people would just get in their car and go do a quick curbside pickup or walking to the store, as opposed to waiting for a week for something that says it'll be here on Wednesday, but it ends up being on a Friday. So I think we're going to see a dip in volume slightly, but at the same time, there's still half of the people who said they're not comfortable walking into a store at this point, and they'll continue to buy online. So
yeah,
to answer your question, it will be maintained. I think we'll see a bit of a dip, but it will be much higher than last year.
But is there a particular day that one can point to, just kind of enshrine it? Just like there's Cyber Monday, Black Friday, is there a day that we can enshrine and say, all right, this is going to be COVID Thursday or COVID what Sunday or some day where just the volumes went through the roof?
I think it varies by industry quite a bit. We have various different retailers we service. For example, one pharmacy retailer and a grocery chain, all of a sudden, toilet paper and all the things that people were stocking up was hot, and that's no longer the case. But you have food that's still 20% higher in that category. So I don't think I can point to a particular day because it's been sustained increased demand.
I see. Wow.
But maybe certain categories, again, you would see everyone started buying before stores shut down. But otherwise, no, it's sustained higher demand since the COVID situation.
So Suresh, are you ready for a new benchmark?
We do, for us, it's the weeks, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, we compare it to, you know, the Black Friday kind of event. So we're calling it an event that's spread across a pretty large extent of time. In our business, you know, because we sell generators and other kind of products like that, you know, whenever there is a hurricane or a storm, we call them storm events. We are referring to this one as a big event, not related to a storm that's lasted 6 to 8 weeks. I hope someone is right that, you know, this continues till the end of the year with a kind of a recession kind of looming around. We don't know if it will, but it's definitely changed the language internally for us in terms of what peaks look like and our ability and our infrastructure, whether it's IT and order volume and also warehouses to handle this kind of peak for a sustained period, particularly when it's unplanned, when there was not a demand forecast or something like this.
Yeah, thank you. Sean, any final thoughts for us here?
I think that the comment about it's probably somewhat industry and segment specific. I think if you were to look at you know, apparel, fashion type of products, it's going to be you know, one of the days or weeks leading to Mother's Day, right? Because that's really the only big event that's occurred thus far. I mean, Father's Day will be big, but let's be honest, it's not Mother's Day. You know, so I suspect it was probably leading up to that. I think you will likely have to see a rebalancing of what, you know, last mile means. And I think if you go pre-COVID, and there was certainly a push for commercial pickup on products. And I think what we've seen now is that basically everything is now residential delivery, which is probably not sustainable. So it'll be interesting to see how we all collectively solve for that and how we look to incentivize you know, redistribution to commercial pickup where possible, whatever form that takes, curbside or other.
Okay, well, thank you all. This was very informative. We very much appreciate the time you have spent with us. First with the, you know, with the interviews, and then again today with the live Q&A. And this is, so to our audience, this is the last in our series. This is Asynchronous Virtual Roundtable number 9. So we've had 9 of those. All of them are available for viewing. We have posted them to our website, and we've given you the you know, the tiny URL for those, so you could again easily access them through the Northwestern University Transportation Center website. This particular one will probably be uploaded in the middle of next week. That's usually when we get those. But the first 8 are already all uploaded. We will be taking a breather, so next week there will not be an AVR, and maybe in a couple of weeks we're going to start a new series that's looking more at sort of the broader urban economy and reopening our cities and what the implications are for transportation modes in urban settings. So thank you for being with us. Thank you for your attention, and thank you very much to our audience and to, of course, our participants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Okay.
Thank you, appreciate it.